Good morning. Happy Saturday, everybody. Just going to give people a moment to get notified that I'm here live. Put some oil on. I thought forgiveness might be a good one to work with today. Apparently, I've been doing a lot of it. It's close to the end. If you're here with me live, let me know that you're here. Say hello in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, say hello on the replay. This version of the new Facebook Live when you're on the desktop does not tell me when people are watching, so say hello. All right, well, I wanted to hop on and share some personal stories with you this morning and also share some messages that have come through in my channeling. And, you know, it's no secret that this has been an incredibly difficult week for many people, but really for all of us, you know, regardless of where we live, what our own personal experiences are. You know, when time and time again we see these acts of violence against people of color, it brings to the surface what needs to be healed in all of us. And so, you know, depending again on your personal situation and how you may feel like you are or are not being affected by it, you are being affected by it. And all of us are living in the legacy of our ancestors and what was done before. And it's really interesting because in doing this healing work and being on the journey that I've been on personally, you know, it kind of starts at this level of communicating with nature in general, right? You're talking to the trees, or you might be aware of nature spirits or fairies or Bigfoot, as I like to share about. And some of these things are fun and you know, the energies are very high vibe and very fun to work with. And at that level, you know, that's really kind of the first level that pulls you into this work. But it really doesn't take long to just go one layer below once you start interacting in this way. And what you start being conscious of when you're working with the land and on the land is the presence of what I call the ancestors. And it can be your direct ancestors, but it can just be, and oftentimes is, the ancestors that lived in this area before you did. Or in my case, so when I'm doing property readings, I usually ask for the ancestors to come forward and ask for their messages. And what happens when I do that, you know, I'm connecting in with places that I've never visited before, I haven't been to, I don't live there. And so sometimes I'm not aware of the history. And so what oftentimes happens afterwards is I go look things up because I'm curious about what they have showed me, and I'm interested in learning more about their experiences. And so this has really been kind of a progressive journey for myself to start asking questions and start looking into things. And it really started with going just to even look about like what the history was about how a town was founded. And it's really interesting as you move across the United States in particular, you know, obviously depending on when that part of the country was settled, how much information you can find about the native people and how that community came to be. And what I started finding over and over again was one sentence in on a website somewhere that says something like, you know, when you're looking up the history of a community, it'll say, and then the native people sold the land to the settlers. And that's it. That's the whole story. And I think most of us can guess that it wasn't that simple. And it wasn't just a simple transaction. And there was a lot of violence involved, and there was, a lot of taking involved. And so the stories are a little closer to the surface as you get, further west, because it's more recent and you can find much more in-depth stories, but you still sometimes have to really look and really hunt and really try to find the other side of the story and the other perspective. And so again, as I've done these property readings and as I've done this work and time has gone by, I have worked to uncover a lot of those stories. Or if you've followed me online for any period of time, I share about this on Instagram stories a lot, because it's kind of like things that come to me in the moment or that I notice. But last summer I was traveling and actually doing some ancestral work with my own ancestral line, but I just happened to be wandering around a community that I stayed the night in, and went and visited these just beautiful, lovely hot springs. And there was a big sign out in front of the hot springs talking about the history and their use, and how important the hot springs were to the native people in the area. But again, it like summed it up in one sentence where it just said, at some point, the indigenous people stopped using the hot springs, and so-and-so bought them and turned them into a tourist attraction. And that like just gets me really angry, because they didn't stop using the hot springs. They were relocated to a reservation against their will. And these types of things are still very much present in our lives today and in our communities today. And we see it bubbling up. We see this anger, we see this pain, we see this trauma coming out and affecting us all. And hi, thank you everybody for saying hi. Hi Tracy, hi Harmony, Hillary, Inga, hello everybody. Thank you for being here. And so these are the things that, now here in this time, we are getting the opportunity to heal and work through, but we can't do it by ignoring and turning a blind eye to everything that has happened before. And I've had the experience that it's almost like every time I try to look at something from a wider view, it pulls me right back to my personal view, pulls me back to my ancestors and my experiences. And, I have a heavily European descent on both sides of my family. And in the research that I have done about my family, and my parents have done extensive research, we have collectively, all these different lines going all different directions at different points in time, but very much have embodied, settlers to America in every way that you can think about it. And so a couple of years ago, I started getting this message that like, the spirits of the land have stories that want to be told, and can help tell some of their stories. And I was like, well, I don't even know where to start. How should I do that? And so I sent an email out saying, hey, if you have a place that's you think has a story that needs to be told, send it to me, and I'll start tuning into these places and hearing the messages. And so I wasn't really sure how it was going to work. I got all these messages, and I started kind of like picking through everything and trying to sense and feel into where to start. And I noticed I had 3 or 4 requests from Kentucky. And I was like, that's unusual. I don't think that like I have, an inordinate number of people in Kentucky that are on my email list. So it pulled my attention, and I tuned into it more. And I realized that it was an ancestor of mine who settled Kentucky very, very early on. And so it was an opportunity, I keep thinking like, oh, it's this big picture story. And no, it wasn't. It was my ancestors trying to connect with me and trying to show me something. And in that particular case, it was really interesting because, again, he was very, very early settler to Kentucky. And when I connected with his energy, he kept repeating to me over and over how fearful he was, how frightened he was for his family. They were alone on the frontier, and that was very scary and dangerous to them. But what has come to me and what I realize over and over again is that our ancestors came to a place they were unfamiliar with, that they didn't really belong, and they were incredibly fearful. And what they did was they took that fear and attempted to remove it by asserting their dominion and asserting their power over people not like them and places that they didn't understand. And that is still reverberating and still coming forward in our daily lives. And so these last couple of days, I've been really thinking into kind of the messages that I've been receiving about this, and some of the experiences that I've had in ceremony with ancestors. And oftentimes, what I experience is the ancestors will come forward and ask to do healing ceremonies. And I've shared and talked about this before. And I think, though, that I have a different perspective right now than maybe I have the last couple of years, in that I've always kind of questioned, like, why am I here? You know, what is my purpose in this ceremony? You know, if they're in spirit, can't they just work this out? And it's not necessarily that they still have a problem. And again, if they are healed ancestors, if they have crossed over, they do have a different perspective and they are in a different place. And so that's what I'm usually experiencing are these ancestors who have crossed over and can see things from another perspective, and now they want to have a healing ceremony. And so I shared last summer about one that was a Mormon settler and a Ute tribe member that wanted to come together and call together other members and do some healing work between them. I have Mormon ancestors that were early settlers into Utah, and I shared extensively about that last summer when I went and visited the area. And so I think the first time I thought of it as more of a general thing. And then when I went back again last summer to work specifically with my ancestors, I realized again, like, no, this is about me. This is about my ancestors and their heritage and them wanting to do healing. And so what I had really thought about in the past was that, you know, they're wanting to ground their energy, ground this healing into the earth now. And that's why they need a physical human to do that. And that's true. That's definitely kind of how that works. But what I'm seeing now is that they're really trying to get our attention. They're really trying to say, like, we can't do this from the other side. We may have created some of what, well, all of what we're experiencing now, but you are embodied now, and you are the ones that can do this healing now while you're embodied on work. Don't wait to get to the other side, and don't wait for or think that the ancestors can do it all on the other side. We need to do it here. And so what I'm realizing is that these ceremonies they have showed me repeatedly isn't just for them to do some kind of healing. It is a request for us to get involved and for us to do some healing. And so I sat down this morning and really asked more about that, and really, you know, question more about these ceremonies and working with the ancestors in this way. And yeah, Mary Elizabeth says, I'm in Provo and can really feel this. Yeah. I have been pulled to Utah repeatedly. And it was really last summer that it became clear to me, although yes, I was doing grid work, and yes, I was doing, you know, there was other work that was happening there. There was a lot of healing that needed to happen in that ancestral line. And speaking back to the fear for just a moment, what became very clear to me when I was able to really connect with them energetically, and I went to the cemeteries where they were buried, connected with their energies, was that same level of fear, right? That the Mormons were recruiting Scandinavian, European members, paying their passage to America and bringing them to Utah. And I really had that sense and that feeling of standing on the other side of the Rocky Mountains and looking east and thinking how that must have felt. Like there was no going back. There was no, it didn't, you may have gone all this way and realized that you made a horrible mistake, but there was no changing it. And there was no there was no option to say, maybe I don't agree with this. And so there is much healing that needs to happen, for some of our ancestors on the other side, because they see how this, their actions and their choices have maybe, continued to reverberate forward into this line. And so, again, when I sat down this morning and really asked about it, it was kind of an interesting thing, because what they shared with me was that we sometimes look at our life like we have it easy, right? We can look at past generations and say how hard they had it. Like they had it hard, we have it easy. And really what Spirit shared with me was like they did have it hard, but they had it like physical challenges, especially in some cases, emotional and mental challenges as well. But what they said to me this morning was, our ancestors, but also the other versions of ourselves that have lived in these other lives, had the experience that was a very clear restriction of their freedom in one way or another, depending on the time and the place and whatever. And that we have chosen to be embodied here in this time, because we get to explore a different dichotomy, really, in that we are told and we believe that our freedoms are not restricted, that we are, that our free will is, open to us. We can do whatever we want. And what they said was like, and so what are you going to do with that? And do you really believe that, that you have free will and that your freedom, that you have your freedom? And when you can look around at what's happening in the world, what you can see is that even if you personally feel like you have that freedom, there are a lot of people in this country, in this world, that do not feel that way, that are living in what people are telling them is a free country, and they're not experiencing freedom at all. And so that was really kind of what was being shared with me, is that what seems to be true may not actually be true. And that makes our lives a little more difficult than in some ways where you at least understood where you stood, what you did, what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. And so what they said to me today, and what I put in the description for this video, is will you let your ancestors assist you now? And will you let them work through you to dismantle that which they put in place? I'm reading off of my notes here that I channeled this morning. And they said the healing work begins in our own hearts. And it's really interesting because they were saying it's hard for us sometimes because we're looking at things as like this big issue and this big problem that feels very impersonal. We may not be personally experiencing it. They're like, you have to make it small and you have to make it personal because it is. And so it becomes, the healing work begins in our own hearts. And I think so many of us are at that moment right now where we're saying, I see the problem, I see what's going on, but I don't know what I should do personally. Let me clear this message coming in. I don't know what I should do personally. And if you're on social media, there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of opinions about what you should do or what you should not do. And in many cases, they're conflicting. And so I was kind of trying to get to the bottom of like, so what do we do? And, the answer really is that it's personal for each of us. And we have to feel into our own hearts, and we have to stand in our own pillar of light, call in our own higher self, make our own connection with source, make our own connection with our ancestors, because it is different for each one of us. We each have different healing to do within ourselves, but also within our ancestral lines. And so, and some of us feel that we know that we don't want to continue what came from our ancestors, but like it's still there. The energy is still there if it hasn't been worked through and healed. And so we have an opportunity to do that. And so they said, when we step into alignment with our hearts, and with our own energy, what you personally need to do, what I personally need to do, will become clear. And they related it, actually, what they said was to feel into which chakra you're most feeling activated. What is it? If you are really feeling into the throat chakra, like that the throat chakra needs healing, then your role and your healing might be to be speaking out, to be using your voice, to be protesting, to be, it just depends. You need to kind of feel into that and see. If you're feeling it more in your root chakra, that there's like safety issues, that you are concerned for your safety, or feeling like your safety or your freedoms might be taken away from you, then there's healing in that area that needs to be done. If it's in your heart, then maybe there's something, there's work you can do to be sharing your generosity, sharing your heart energy with others. And so when you think about it in that way, it kind of takes away some of the overwhelming pieces of there's so much that needs to be done, and what can I personally do, or how can I make a difference? But what you realize is if we each really step into, I'm like really feeling the emotion of my ancestors coming in. If you're really feeling into where in your body are you feeling called, that's where the ancestors are reaching in and asking for your healing work. And in doing that, you'll be letting them work through you to undo the things. They can see it. They're on the other side. They see what they created, and they want to help undo it. So, and yeah, Tracy says everything we do here is based on love. When we work from the heart, it's a cleaner healing, and it's so true. I almost feel like no matter which chakra you're feeling it in, like you're going to feel it in your heart, and you're going to feel, there's going to be work that you can do from your heart center. Absolutely. And so, so don't get caught up in like doing all the things, but do the thing, the things. And I think it's so easy right now to just share a post, and say, oh, go read this. And, that's helpful. I think we need to see the critical mass of people saying, all of these things are not okay, and there's lots of different ways in which we can engage, but it's going to take each of us doing this personal healing that will soften our hearts, that will help connect us with other people. It's really one of the more impactful things I've seen is a graphic of your ancestors, kind of a thing. So it's like and then your 2 parents, and then your 4 grandparents, and your 8, right? And it doesn't take very many generations to have like thousands of people. And so from there, you can really get a concept of how quickly we're all connected. But if we don't really feel that connection, if we don't really feel that love and feel into that, then it can't, it's just a thing we say. Oh yeah, oh, we're all connected. Oh, we're all one. Well, that's a nice idea, but how are we displaying that? And how are we sharing that and showing that to others? So yeah, they just really, the message that came through was when we each choose to do this work, it will manifest the healing that is needed into our reality. And so again, instead of trying to take this big impersonal thing, you like make it small and personal, and make it be, what do I need? Where is the healing coming through? What opportunities do I have? And know that that's, it's not just you, it is the energy of your ancestors coming through you to help with things that perhaps they either weren't able to do or didn't choose to do in their lifetimes. And so that's the opportunity that we have. So I just wanted to share some of that with you today. Again, I know that this is weighing heavy on so many of our hearts, and that's why we have this opportunity. There's so much happening. I cannot help but think, we're just heading into this eclipse window, and part of the big thing in eclipses is eclipsing, removing things that no longer serve us. And so here we're having this opportunity on a grand scale to eclipse some things out that don't serve us collectively anymore. And so take a few moments today, feel into where in your body you're really feeling this, connect with your ancestors, and see what is personally needed from for your healing and for theirs. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, a wonderful weekend, and I will see you soon.